Hello and welcome to the People Space podcast. Today is particularly exciting for me because I'm hosting a very special and interesting guest. He is a man whose visionary leadership has not only transformed and left an indelible mark on Zambian football, but has transformed and significantly continues to make contributions to the very backbone of Zambia's economy, of Zambia's economic key sector, and that is the energy sector. And my guest, ladies and gentlemen, is no other than Mr. Andrew Kamanga. He is the CEO of Northwestern Energy. And of course, today we will be delving into nitty gritties of the energy sector, its contribution to the economic sector, and just, of course, to get his perspective. I know the majority of you know him so much when it comes to football, but he is, I would say, one of the giant contributors of the stability that some of us, we are enjoying today when it comes to the energy sector. So we will be getting to know that side of him today on People Space podcast. Mr. Kamanga, I'm very exciting to have you today and welcome.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So what would like to find out, obviously, the majority, whenever they see the face of Andrew Kamanga, nothing else comes in their mind apart from football. But we would like to understand, first of all, just take us through your professional journey, from football to energy.
No, it's the other way around. I've always been in energy because football was just a by the way. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a big deal. But of course, I've been involved with football for many, many years. But professionally, I trained as a chartered accountant and then also did my Master of Sciences in Energy, Environment, Technology, and Economics. And I've basically worked in uh, public as well as private sector. I've been involved in with the auditing firms, initially with KPMG and at some point Price Waterhouse. I've also worked in government. I was the head of economic regulation at ERB. And then, of course, I worked for another electrical engineering company called ABB. And since 2001, I set up an energy advisory firm called Enfin. And along the way, we moved on and set up Northwestern, which has been operating since 2008. And my specialty is basically financial advisory, investment advisory, as well as the power sector and the energy sector. So, in summary, that's who I am.
Interesting, interesting. And in fact, I'd like to make a disclaimer to all of you is that I have not brought Mr. Kamanga here to discuss football, if that's what you were expecting, by the way. We're here to discuss the energy sector. So, turning our attention, Mr. Kamanga, to energy sector, obviously would like to find out, having described your expertise, the wealth of your expertise and your contribution and journey in the energy sector, how has Zambia's energy sector evolved? And are there any opportunities that you can specifically, enlighten us on for independent power traders?
Well, I think it's always important to look back where we are coming from. I think following on from the change of government in 1991, we saw the shift towards embracing of privatization, and as part of the government program, we saw the first national energy policy being enacted in 1994. And then around 1998, it also brought in the creation of the likes of the Energy Regulation Board to basically regulate the sector. And I was one of the pioneers when the ERB was set up. And as part of the reforms, we were basically looking at reorganizing the sector because, as you would expect, prior to the reforms, we only had ZESCO, which was a vertically integrated company. So they were involved and they are still involved in generation, transmission, distribution, and supply. Along the way, private sector kicked in. We saw CEC coming out of the privatization, and they are basically involved in transmission of power into the copper belt because at that time the mines were just on the copper belt, and with growth coming in, the extension of the mines has gone into the northwest. For those who know, the entire northwestern province at some point was operating on diesel until ZESCO put in the 330 kV network, which has seen the new developments where we've now got mines in Solwezi, Lumwana, Kalumbila, even stretching up to Mwinilunga. And of course, having that background, we also got involved as the first private electricity distribution company as Northwest. We started out in Lumwana, moved on to Solwezi and Kalumbila. So our model is very basic. We buy power from ZESCO and sell to the mine townships. So we've invested in infrastructure starting from 33 kV lines. We go into our 33 to 11 kV substation. Then we run the 11 kV network and step down to 400 volts. And we supply power into the residentials as well as commercial and industrial customers. In terms of the participation, you did mention about the independent power producers. We've come from a background where we've had the likes of Lunsemfa Hydro, um, Mamba also coming in, Kariba North Bank, Iteji. So in that setup, we had what we called a single buyer model. So all these were producing and selling to ZESCO, and then ZESCO would then do the onward sales to the end users. Mamba came in along the way as one of the IPPs, and they were also selling to ZESCO. I think they came into the market around 2016. But as you would expect, the market has evolved, and we've recently seen the participation of power traders, where now the market is opening up. It's no longer a single buyer model. We are now seeing a situation where private traders or traders can come in and participate in the market. And I think that has been facilitated through the national energy policy, where the issue of open access was brought in 2019, but it was obviously implemented by the current government, and most of the power traders, probably three, four, and the number is increasing. They've started now participating in the market. So the market is open. They bring in the power and they're able to sell to the end users. Of course, the big issue is the creation of the independent system operator, which function is currently being managed by ZESCO. And we hope that with time, as the market settles, there will be predictability and obviously transparency in the way the market is going to function. So it's still at the stage where we do have a few teething problems here and there, but ultimately the journey has started.
Okay, interesting. You've mentioned about the paradigm shift in terms of the single model to where we are now as the market continues to develop. We would also want to understand what is the role of power traders and how critical are they to Zambia's economic development? You did highlight, the briefly the economic impact that electricity is having in northwestern province.
Well, I think the key driver for power traders is the business opportunity that has been created, because as you'd expect, in the past, ZESCO was the one involved in importing power. So the traders have filled that space. They're able to buy the power from wherever it's available and then bring it into the market and also find the market within. So they can import the power, use the ZESCO network, and then ultimately sell to the end users. Now, what you see with that is for a long time, we've had limited investment coming into the sector on account of the tariff constraint, because tariffs drive the level of investment in any power system. So what we are seeing today is that the coming in of power traders has also helped in pushing the tariffs to where we think they should be. So, in a way, the power trading has brought in market stability, market certainty, and also an increase in the tariffs that are obtaining. And ultimately, we hope that if this is sustained, we will then see a lot of investment coming on to support the trading that is going on. We want to see more generation. We want to see an increase in transmission. Government currently has a plan to produce 10,000 megawatts by 2030, which is fairly close. But these are things which we will see happening, assuming they do get to that point. What is also important, we are coming from a background of load shedding, which I think a lot of people may not have been happy about. It's become a political debate, but we've always had load shedding, whether it was during the MMD time of Rupiah Banda, they had to import power using the Kapawa ship. Even the time of PF and Edgar Lungu, we did have load shedding. They equally came up with that option. But this time round, this is when we've seen the attempt to resolve the load shedding using the introduction of power traders. So the market is definitely evolving, but we have a lot to do. Insofar as the market is concerned, yes, we've opened up generation. We need transmission, we need distribution and supply. What is key is that on the generation side, with the load shedding, which has been excapitated by the climate challenges, I think as a country, we've not done much in terms of diversifying away from hydro, because predominantly hydro accounts for over 85% of the generation that we have. So the moment we have challenges with water for power generation, then it reduces the available capacity into the market. So initiatives have been brought in. I think this is why you've seen a big announcement around more solar projects coming. Mamba also doing phase two. But the ultimate is to ensure that we have an energy system that can withstand all these shocks which are external, especially the climate.
Mm. You've talked about the 10,000 megawatts goal, which government has. I would like to get your thoughts as an expert. Is this feasible? Looking at this is 2026, we only have 4 years. Is it feasible? If not, what can be done, or when do you see it realistically being accomplished?
Well, nothing is impossible to start with. I mean, if I was on the government side, again, planning for power development is not a short term activity. It's something that needs to be done over a long period of time. We need to have the master plan. It's not fixing problems as they arise, it's having a long term view. Even the 10,000 megawatts may be a target for now, but the big question is it the ultimate? I would say no. Today, where I'm sitting, I would want to see a 10-year, 20-year, 30, 50-year energy master plan, which speaks to everything without looking at the 10,000 by 2030, because that's just the point. So you achieve 10,000, then what next? And the economy also grows at different levels. I mean, we are predominantly a mining industry. Government has been making statements around trying to get copper production to 3 million tons. We are just getting closer to a million. But to achieve 3 million tons, it means all these mines have to operate at a higher capacity. And with that, they'll need power. And with that, to move that power, you also need the transmission infrastructure to be able to get it from where it's being generated to where the power will be consumed. So we really need to take a long term view in terms of what we think we need. But also with the 10,000, yes, we can produce, consume some of it, and then have an opportunity to export. And as you said in your introduction, some of these power traders are also looking at investing in transmission lines. There's a Kalumbila Kolwezi transmission line being developed by ENI Power. And there's also Canona doing the Zambia Tanzania interconnector on the other side. So we hope that we will see more interconnection coming up so that whatever power is generated, we are able to get it to the market and also export. I think the DRC presents a big opportunity because the mines there have really increased in terms of production, but they are also having challenges with the power and importation of power. Obviously, we do have two corridors. We get power from Mozambique. We do get power from ESCOM through Zimbabwe, but even that corridor, the capacity constraints are obviously going to become a real challenge fairly soon. So, as much as we are thinking about taking the power out, we should also be thinking about making the access easy. It's almost like the way you've built the Ndola Lusaka dual carriageway. It was single lane. Now it will be double lane simply because the capacity or the traffic has increased. So the same applies to the power transmission, and those are the real issues.
Mm. Interesting. Another thought, you did hint that in our quest to diversify um, generation or reduce over reliance on hydro. Obviously, there are options like solar that we can consider. There's coal with Mamba over there. One of the things that I've heard people talk about, is the issue when it comes to solar, the issue of, base load issues. And also, solar obviously depends on natural factors like hydro. If there's no rain, you won't get enough. If there's no sunlight, you will not get enough. So, which one would you then say should be our strategic focus that places us at advantage when we talk about generation?
Well, I think when it comes to baseload power, coal is obviously ahead of solar. And with coal, even today, and I've spoken about this so many times, we have enough coal reserves where we can even generate up to 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 megawatts and provide the baseload into the system because the core resource is available. But the challenge will always be the same point I raised: is the tariff high enough to justify the investment? Because whoever is developing the project needs to have enough cash flows to pay off the lenders. And of course, you would hear that core is not climate friendly. But at the end of the day, the technology has improved to a point where emissions are almost non-existent. So for me, coal still remains very, very key in the mix. In fact, if I was a policymaker, I would really push that the ratio between hydro and coal should really be 1 to 1. Yes, solar is good, but as you alluded, we may have challenges with the climate, but also the solar side. There's what they call battery, so you can produce during the day, store the power, and then still make it available in the evening or when you are not generating. But of course, it comes at a price, and I think those are the dynamics which one needs to look at. But ultimately, I think what is important is to have a well-diversified energy mix, and that provides the energy security. But outside coal, there's still other forms of resource that we could look at. For instance, if you just go across into Tanzania, their generation is predominantly gas fired until recently. That's when they went into hydro as well. So we could import coal, we could import gas into the northern part of the country, put up a gas fired plant. We can produce more electricity from gas. We've had the Ndola energy using heavy fuel oil, but of course the pricing has been a bit of a challenge. It's very, very expensive. Just like diesel generation, it will never be cheap because the cost of diesel is high. If you go to countries like Kenya, they've got geothermal. We have at a small scale exploration going on where I think there's one company in southern province called Kalahari Energy. They're trying to generate power from geothermal. So I think, like I said, if we take a long-term view, we need to invest in the resource um, estimation or capability or justification or at least confirmation, validation of available resources from the various types of energy forms that you can get to be able to produce electricity. And it's not impossible, but it's a fairly doable exercise.
Can you highlight some of the challenges that independent power traders face in Zambia and how they can possibly be addressed?
Well, independent power traders. So, first of all, we need to be clear. Is it independent power producers or independent power traders? Because the two are different. Because you've got IPPs who basically produce and sell into ZESCO. But now, with the market opening up, they can equally produce and sell to third parties.
So they can play that dual role.
Exactly. Which is actually very, very good. And this is why even ourselves as a distribution company, we've now seen an opportunity because of the open trading will not be restricted to buy power and trade to our customers. In fact, with the load shedding, we ended up in a situation where we were also buying power from the power traders because they are the ones who had the power available. Of course, it was expensive, but they were able to cover the gap and we basically kept our operations running. So in that context, we are also taking a position around investing in generation. So we are looking at going into solar generation in Solwezi, Lumwana, and Kalumbila. We are also exploring possibilities of going into co-generation because now with the market coming up and opening up, I don't have to buy power for my own consumption. I buy for my own consumption. If I have excess, I can then find the market and trade it, and the price is right.
Interesting. You are watching the People Space podcast with me, Wenson Mavor, and my guest today is Mr. Andrew Kamanga. We are talking the energy sector, looking at the opportunities, the challenges, and possibly the solutions that independent power producers and traders are facing, how they can be navigated for the sole purpose of the growth of the overall sector that contributes significantly to the Zambian economy. We will take a break and be back shortly.
This is Engineer Christopher Kangombe. Join me on the People's Space podcast as we discuss the Constituency Development Fund, what is working, what is not working, and how best we can improve this fund to be able to impact more on our people in our various communities. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to People's Space Podcast. Today we are discussing Zambia's energy sector, and my guest is a name that is a household name for those that know the energy sector and who the key contributors are. And this is no other than Mr. Andrew Kamanga, CEO of Northwestern Energy. And I'd like to take this opportunity to also remind those that are watching or may have an opportunity to follow other episodes of the People's Space Podcast that you do stand yourself a chance to win some fantastic and amazing prizes. All you simply have to do is be interactive on our platforms where we do air our episodes, which is YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and other social media platforms under the handle CTPD Zambia and the Center for Trade Policy and Development. If your comment garners enough traction, you might just be that lucky winner. And by the way, we do also have, due to our good graces with our guests, can create an opportunity for you to be able to say, interact with Mr. Kamanga and get to ask more about the opportunities that are in the energy sector. But the catch is you have to be interactive on our channels. Mr. Kamanga, there is something interesting that we mentioned earlier on, which I thought pertinent to go back to. You mentioned about the potential that core has to not only address the current deficit that besets the country energy wise, and I would also like to couple that with the push that I've seen. For lack of a better term, I'm not an expert like you, but for lack of a better term, I like to call it the double standards I see from the West, where we see there will be people that will be advocating and telling Africans, stay away from coal. Yet there are economies which are advanced, generations miles ahead of us, are being powered by coal.
And you don't have to look far. In South Africa, coal is the major source of generation. It's the same in Australia. It's the same in America. The underlying issue that I mentioned is that the technology has improved to a point where previously the argument against coal was on emissions and it came into the issues of climate change. But the fact that the technology is able to improve and reduce the emissions, it makes it affordable and available. Of course, the lenders to coal projects may frown upon funding a project and use that as an excuse. But look, where there's an opportunity to generate the power and there's somebody who's going to take the power, you don't really need to belabor the point because it's a self-financing project. And I think for me, given the fact that we do have enough core reserves and the resource can last even 200 million years, we can actually even today produce 5,000 megawatts from core. We can even go up to 10,000 without even worrying because the opportunity is still there.
And
So
that would solve our load
immediately,
shedding.
yes, I was happy you raised the point and made a distinction between solar and core. Core is baseload, so it will be there 24/7. Solar, yes, may give you the short-term solution outside having an added battery system, which obviously comes at a cost. You may find that having core resolves your problem. Even next door in Zimbabwe, there's Wange coal mine. They are producing a lot of power out of the coal. So it's something that we have to live with. I mean, I've been in West Africa where there's a project to produce up to 10,000 megawatts of coal because they have the resource. The challenge they have is to build 500 kilometers of transmission lines and then the interconnectors. But the resource is readily available.
Interesting. We did talk about challenges briefly, and for players such as yourselves, who are taking advantage of the evolving of the market by playing a dual role of producing and trading, how do you navigate the challenge associated with price volatility?
I think the issue of pricing traditionally in the power market, you have what is called the power purchase agreements. These are long-term agreements where the producer and the buyer agree on a fixed tariff over a period of time. But as you said, in the short term, you could have the markets creating opportunities where you can cash in. But ultimately, if you are going to invest in generation, you have to have a tariff that's sustainable over a long period of time. I think the point for me that underpins everything that we are discussing today is that the introduction of power trading has caused the prices to shift because, like everything else in economics, price is a function of supply and demand. So the moment you have load shedding and the power is available, so whoever has the power at whatever price, people will respond and buy. So we hope that the prices that are obtaining currently can be sustained to even allow investment to come in.
Earlier on, you did touch on the issue of reforms, and I'd like you to speak to that on a broader scale in relation to how further, we can see growth not only of, IPTs, but IPPs going forward. And for IPPs like yourselves, who have been in the market for a long time, we've seen open access and we've seen a lot more coming on board from the policy side of things. I would like you to speak to that.
Well, I think open access is just a good starting point. But what is key is ensuring that the market is able to survive over a long period of time. And market survival depend on the ability of the market to produce the power and the ability of the end users to be able to take the power. In fact, in our setup, 70% of whatever power is generated is consumed by the huge consumers such as the mines and the industrial customers. Yes, residential has equally grown, but it cannot account for that huge requirement for power. However, going forward, I would like to see further reforms where the market is opened up even more. I mean, I've spoken about this so many times with different governments going back maybe 20 years, where we've always argued and said, look, even our model as Northwestern is a model that I think could be replicated in the market, where you now say you create more distribution companies and then allow those who are generating through the open access with the independent system operator, you are now able to have trading. So basically, what will happen is you have generators and distributors at the tail end. So in between, the generator sells to the distributor, and of course, they pay for the wheeling, and then the distributor, by virtue of having invested in the last mile connection, equally recovers that investment they've put in. So the whole market needs to be reorganized in that extent. So if we created more distribution opportunities, I think for me, that will really make the market more efficient, allow more generators, because the trading that is going on now is predominantly looking at the big consumers. We are not looking at the households. Of course, there's been a policy directive or formulation around what they are calling net metering, where even at the domestic level, if I'm able to generate more power, if I can have excess, I can put it into the grid. Of course, the metering side of things become the key issue. But before we even get to that stage, I think we need to get to a point where we create more distribution companies. And these are buying power from the generators through the normal PPAs, paying for the wheeling, and then ultimately we will get the right prices on the downstream, on the retail side. Because today, the retail market is regulated by ERB. In fact, there's only two companies that sell power to the end user retail customers. It's Zesco and ourselves, and that price is basically fixed. That's why you've got different bands. R1, which goes up to 100 kilowatts, and then as you consume more, you basically spend more. And I think this is the debate which has been going on fairly recently. I'm sure you've seen that in the last 2 months, there's been an improvement in the supply of electricity. But it has also come with a challenge that the units are finishing very, very quickly. So,
As a supplier to the homes, tell us why,
Yeah, no,
why who is chewing?
no, but it's the way the pricing has been set. So you pay 100, you pay for the first 100 kilowatt, you pay 35 ingwe. And then you go to the next band and the next band. So if you've exhausted your 100, it means the next time you're buying, you're paying at a higher price. And if you've exhausted and gone up to the last band, then it becomes fairly expensive. And I think at that point, you also, at a domestic level, need to now start thinking about becoming more energy efficient, managing your utilization of power, and then ensuring that you pay the least price that you should.
I love the fact that you've guided the issue of energy efficiency and everything. But personally, as your potential customers, Northwestern Energy, I don't have a problem paying more as long as power doesn't go.
Well, it's what determines
Yeah.
the market, and this is why even the trading has come in, because the big consumers, such as the mines, they are paying much more. Because just to put it in context, imported power was coming in at 7.5 cents. With the traders coming in, it's gone up to somewhere around 13. In some cases, it's even going as high as 18 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's basically telling you that that is where the price should be.
And cost reflectivity, as you mentioned, is the key to attracting more investment. But let me again draw back to one of the important thoughts which you mentioned: the need to open more distribution companies within the energy, value chain. And from an opportunity point of view, you are a Zambian that has successfully operated in this sector and contributed. I mean, I will say it without shame. In case you are diplomatic about it, I'll repeatedly say it here that you have contributed significantly to the energy sector, stabilizing the energy sector of this country. And this is something that, as Zambians, we should be proud of when we see people like Andrew Kamanga, what would be your encouragement? Because there's always this, sometimes stereotype that people have when it comes to the energy sector. Like you said, it's not a sector that is like selling fritters. I sell today, I get my money right there and then. There are these procedures. Sometimes it takes time to be able to stabilize, to be able to start seeing returns, and there are all these complexities altogether. What would you tell Zambians right now, that would be interested to come into this sector, but are thinking, with all these complexities?
Well, I think there's somebody who's writing a book and about my journey in business. It would be an interesting book to read. But from an investment advisory perspective, what I always tell people is that, in life and in business, it's not so much the capital that stops you from getting started. What is important is for you to have the idea. So the idea has to be there, and then the capital will follow the idea, not the other way around. It's not like I have to have 10 million kwacha before I start any business. I need to have the idea. Then I'll know it will cost me so much. And then I'll know where to go. And if you want to invest, like everything else, the investment will be evaluated. Lenders have got their own criteria. But what is important, coming back to the power sector, is that this is a sector where you will not get your return today. You have to be patient. It will probably take 10 years before you start seeing things stabilizing. But like everything else with growth, the opportunities are there. I'll give you an example. Just a few days ago, I was at one of our sites. The mine has been instrumental in providing anchorage to the houses they've built for the mines. And the town now is growing to a point where there's opportunity to build even an additional 5,000-10,000 houses because you're building a new town. Now, that new investment is not underpinned by the mine. But you see, we are already sitting there. We've got our infrastructure there. So now we have to make a decision that for the new housing that is coming up, we have to put in the backbone. So we have to invest in the 33 kV network before we even get to the last mile connection. We have to invest in the substation. So we were just looking at the required investment. It's sitting at $5 million. Now, we may get one or two customers coming in today. So we have to spend 5 million to accommodate the 10,000 houses, but we have to spend it today. But we cannot charge or recover that from the one or two customers who've shown up today. So that is the dilemma that you face as you invest and expand the activity. But of course, at the end of the day, even ourselves, our core business is to sell power. That is where we make the money. But before you sell the power, you have to take it to the consumer. But before you take it to the consumer, you now have to pay to take it there. So we are looking at various models around how we can sustain such an investment opportunity that has come through. But that's the reality of. So we will spend upfront. Customers will come at different points. Eventually, we will recover that investment, but it may not be over a year, over 2 years, over 5 years. So that's the nature of the power industry.
Okay. Earlier on, you did also highlight a few players and building on that. Would you let us in on some of the examples of successful partnerships and projects that demonstrate the impact that IPPs and IPTs have on the Zambian economy as we speak?
Well, I think the opportunity for me, the very fact that we've been able to allow other players in the market other than ZESCO has sent a very good signal to the market, because also remember, even ZESCO have made this point that during this load shedding, it wasn't easy for them to import the power. But the power traders, with a bit of liquidity, with capacity to borrow, to sign up the agreements with whoever is selling them the power, they've been able to bring the power into the market and obviously provide the cushion. But ultimately, what we need is a long-term, predictable, sustainable power system that should be able to absorb shocks as and when they happen.
Mm. One of the things that we've been discussing, obviously, is the issue of opportunity and the market, obviously, for IPPs and IPTs is not restricted to the borders of Zambia. There's the SADC region itself. So I would also like to understand the role that people such as yourselves at Northwestern Energy play in terms of ensuring that there's, like promoting regional, promoting energy stability or seizing opportunities at a regional level.
Well, what you need to understand is the current setup, the power system in the region is organized under the Southern African Power Pool. And initially, it started as a government to government initiatives where all the utilities in the region would create interconnectivity and then allow the trade of the power depending on who was having excess and who was having a deficit. However, over time, the Southern African power pool has been able to evolve equally because they also have a day ahead market where you can trade and buy power. And you also have off peak power, which you can buy depending on who's got excess and who's got a deficit. So, power trading is obviously something that is going to be there for a long time to come. However, the evolution has included the inclusion of private players within the Southern African power pool. I think most of the IPPs have joined, most of the traders have been included, even ourselves. We've applied to join the Southern African power pool as part of the trading. But most importantly, as I earlier alluded to, what we are seeing now is the power traders are also taking investment positions where they are investing in interconnectors. The Kalumbila Kolwezi interconnector, CEC is also doing another interconnector into DRC. So if the market was opened up on all fronts, then we'll definitely be getting somewhere. In fact, I've always argued from for many years that if I was a policymaker, I would obviously look at things differently. I would want to see generation. I would probably break the country into 4 quadrants so that from each quadrant I'm able to have generation and mitigate the movement of power and ensure that every side of the country is covered. The northern side, we can bring in power from Tanzania. On the eastern side, we can loop in from Mozambique. On the northern side, now there's even some initiative around getting a backbone into Angola. On the other side, we've got the DRC. So we can become more efficient by having generation on all points because the way the power system was initially set up from historical days, we had generation in the south, and then the consumption was happening on the copper belt. So that was the available corridor. But now we can create even more corridors and ensure that the power is moving. But again, these are the points I've been making that for you to invest in power, you need a long term power master plan. And it doesn't have to be a short term 5 year agenda, but it has to be a 50-year program where you are looking at. And these things change simply because every 5 years you do get elections. So the politicians operate in 5 year cycles, but the power system needs to operate in a slightly a longer cycle.
Finally, Mr. Kamanga, infrastructure obviously remains a key component of a thriving and effective energy sector. So, I'd like to find out how can government collaborate with IPPs and IPTs to be able to ensure that the challenges with regards infrastructure are addressed?
Well, I think some of these issues are things which have been addressed. I'll give you an example. I was hired by the Southern African Development Corporation, the SADC Banking Association, to set up the PPP framework in the country because at that time we didn't have the framework and we didn't even have the transactions. But I was the first consultant to set up the PPP policy as well as the legal and institutional framework. I think we finished that exercise around 2009. And it's only now that we've seen a few PPP projects. The Lusaka Ndola dual carriageway is an example. We are now hearing about having PPP on the Lobito corridor. But for the power sector, these are initiatives that need to be looked at. I'll give you an example. I think when we were involved with the Lumwana mine, before the Kalumbila mine came, we made a proposal to build the 330 transmission line between Lumwana and Kalumbila as a private project. But we were told this can only be done by ZESCO. And even now, FQM had to invest in the second line from Mumbwa into Kalumbila. But you see, all those projects, for me, are an opportunity for the private sector to get involved. I think government really needs to get to a point where you allow private sector participation. Of course, government does a role through the regulation. The rules are set, but allow investment to flourish.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kamanga, for coming through.
Thank you. I hope it's been useful, and I'm always available.
I am glad to hear that you're always available. So we'll definitely call you again just to be able to delve more into the energy sector. But ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. This has been Mr. Kamanga, obviously talking about Zambia's energy sector and giving us some insights into the progresses that are currently being seen, obviously being necessitated by the policy direction that we're seeing, how this can be leveraged, and how, as a country, we can further move to a place where load shedding eventually becomes a thing of the past, and more importantly, we attract more investment. For me, the key takeaways obviously is the issue of pricing as a key component of making sure that the energy sector in Zambia attracts major investment, and this means cost reflectivity. And beyond that, Mr. Kamanga did emphasize strongly on the need for a long-term master plan that will ensure stability and predictability in the sector to make sure that investors have that sense of security, even as we see Zambia's energy sector experience a major turnaround. The name is Wenson Mavoro. Thank you for watching the People Space podcast. And as you've heard, this is not the first and the last. We will definitely get Mr. Kamanga to get to understand more about the energy sector as we see major developments continue to unfold. So see you next time, and thank you for watching.